It's your Thursday daily delivery. I'm Michael Rand, but it could just as easily be your Wednesday daily delivery, your Tuesday daily delivery, any day, any time. But Timberwolves, we're going to get to them in a little bit. We've talked about them a lot this week, and none of the problems seem to be getting any better. So we're going to get to them in a little bit again because they warrant it. They lost 129-117 to Phoenix at Target Center on Wednesday night. Another game where the home crowd was booing them. Another game where they got down by more than 20 points. I think it was 25 probably at a certain point in that game, something like that, before making the score a little bit more respectable toward the end. But the play itself was not respectable, and we need to address that here in a minute. Phil Miller, Twins beat writer from the Star Tribune, will join me here also a little later on in the show. Major League Baseball free agency begins today, and Twins have a lot of decisions to make this year. They've already made some, of course, with some of the club options they've decided on earlier this week, but the big one still waiting on whether they attempt to sign and are able to sign Carlos Correa, shortstop who was here last year and had a very good season for the Twins. So we'll see what they're able to do there, and if they indeed pursue Carlos Correa in free agency. So Phil and I will get into that as well as plenty of other things. We got to talk Wild and the biggest difference between the Wild and the Timberwolves this season, and particularly on Wednesday night. First, though, like I said, we got to talk Timberwolves. You might be getting tired of it. Maybe they don't warrant it from a record standpoint, just 5-7 now. And sometimes it's easier to talk about a team when there is some conflict, when there is some drama. And this team certainly seems to have a lot of conflict right now. The latest loss, a lot of things done poorly. I thought they started out okay in this game. I was watching on TV in this case. I thought they were okay. The energy was okay at the beginning. Thought they were moving the ball decently, and then it just all fell apart again in just kind of a comedy of errors, a comedy of lack of execution and cohesion. And here's the problem. Here's the real problem right now. In addition to the losses mounting, you know, I'm a father. I'm a parent. My wife and I have 3 kids. They're all fairly young, all 8 or under. And a big part of parenthood is understanding that your kids are going to, make mistakes. That they are going to, I think fail is the wrong word. Fail is such a hard word to use in a case like that. But they're going to make mistakes. They're going to try something, and it's not going to go their way. And you're going to encourage them to keep trying it, encourage them to get better. And all you can hope for as a parent is that they learn lessons along the way. That they learn from what they've tried and what hasn't worked. They learn from direction you give them in terms of, hey, you did this, maybe don't do that again because it was either dangerous to yourself, it was, you didn't think about it, you didn't think it all the way through, and this was the consequence of it, things like that. All you can hope for as they're learning, as they're getting older, is that they hopefully learn and don't repeat, at least not over and over and over again, don't repeat the same mistakes and or bad behaviors that they're doing, right? That's how you become a better person. That's how you grow into a confident, well-rounded adult. You don't harp on these mistakes, but you correct them along the way, or you at least encourage them along the way. You let them have the space to figure out what happened, what they might do differently along the way in order to have a different outcome next time. Let them kind of figure it out and give them some guidance along the way. I don't feel like that's happening at all with the Timberwolves. They're doing the same things over and over this season and not seemingly learning from them. And there's kind of the same mistakes they would make even last season when they would go flat, in that they're not moving the ball well. Usually they're not playing cohesively. They're not playing with enough energy. But it's been particularly glaring this year. I feel like they really smoothed it out last season, whereas most games you watched it and they were at least an entertaining, smooth team to watch. Sometimes they didn't make shots, sometimes the other team got hot, sometimes the other team was just better. You live with that. Those are the consequences of a competition where there's a winner and a loser. The Timberwolves this year are beating themselves more often than not. They're playing without energy. They're playing without any kind of mental focus. I mean, yesterday's game, They played an entire possession 5-on-4 because D'Angelo Russell didn't realize who he was supposed to be in the game for. They gave up a three-pointer on that possession. And yeah, you can say, well, they ended up losing by 12. Does it really matter? It does matter. It matters that they were playing that way. It matters that they didn't even realize, after the game that they needed to address it in a certain way. Chris Finch is like, I have no idea what happened. D'Angelo Russell saying, I know what happened, but that's about all I'm going to say about it. Just the repeated mistakes, the repeated lack of energy, that is a real concern to me right now, because that's not always easy to pull yourself out of, and that doesn't feel like they're learning at all. And that's where I think the onus is on Chris Finch, the head coach. I don't think he's done a very good job this season. I think maybe he's trying to give them a lot of opportunity to grow from their own mistakes, which I think can be a smart tactic, but I don't think he's giving them enough guidance along the way. I think he's a quieter, mild-mannered, kind of thinking the game kind of coach. I think they need something more from him right now to push a few more buttons, to get a little bit more, to get them into a different headspace, because I don't think they're in the right spot right now, and I think some of that needs to come from Chris Finch. Let's hear from Chris Finch, by the way, after that game on Wednesday night.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, you got to resist the urge to make like a one-pass shot and just a home run type play. I think there's a lot of that. Even when we tightened the game up today, we took two really quick shots that probably, could have driven or moved it a little bit. But that's it. We when the game starts slipping away, we want it all back in one play. Every team has its own personality. Every team takes a while to find its own chemistry and its own identity as a result. So, what we did last year doesn't really matter right now.
So again, let's see when and if this changes. Anthony Edwards saying Memphis is going to draw the Wolves' best game out of them finally when they play them next, that going back to last year's intense playoff series. We'll see. They keep saying a lot of the right things, and then they go out and do the wrong things over and over again, and that is the sign of a bad team that just doesn't get it right now.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake. With 24/7 gaming, the good times never have to end. And you can satisfy your cravings at our restaurants and bars. Or relax in one of our luxurious hotel rooms. Those that play together, stay together. And don't forget to join Club M so you can spark new memories and bask in the rewards along the way. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
Let's bring in Phil Miller and talk a little bit of Twins. It is the early middle part of November. The World Series has been over for a few days now, and that means free agency begins Thursday. No person I'd rather talk about that with than Phil. Of course, covers the Twins for the Star Tribune, has been now at 36 consecutive World Series that have been played. That's pretty cool. Phil, welcome. Did you enjoy this year's games that you were able to go to?
I did. I went to the 3 in Houston. Unfortunately, missed the no-hitter in Philadelphia, but I thought it was one of the more compelling World Series of recent years, and one that I would think Twins fans who are scarred by their playoff experiences in the last decade and a half might not want to hear it, but probably gives the Twins a little hope too.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe we can start there, just because the Phillies, right, they won 87 games during the regular season. They were 14 games behind two different teams in their division, right? The Atlanta and the Mets both won 101 games. And then they get hot in the playoffs and make it all the way to World Series, and in fact had a 2-1 series lead before Houston kind of recharged and came back and won that series. You and I were talking before we started recording that these extra rounds, these extra like spots in the playoffs do give you more possibilities of just getting in, and then anything can happen. That said, it's also a little bit of a aiming for that mark is also, you're probably not going to have a team like the Phillies do this on a year in and year out basis. You might see a team like this get this far once every 3 or 4 years. So, it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of how you want to go about it. But you're right. In terms of just getting in and having a chance, there is a better chance now, I would say.
Well, Phillies would not have made the playoffs in any year before now, other than the pandemic year. They take 6 teams in each league now. Yeah, the Phillies finished 14 games out in the NL East. The Twins finished 14 games out in the AL Central. Phillies were still 9 games better than the Twins, but it just shows if you're good enough to get to the tournament, and it doesn't take as much as it used to. Baseball is not a sport where the best team always wins. To put it bluntly, the Phillies had a lead at home, could have ended the series there, but the Astros pulled it out. But people in Philadelphia didn't seem to mind that it was that there was going to be any asterisk beside it, because there wouldn't be. That's how a tournament is these days. So, the Twins team that was in first place for 4 months during the regular season was in position to get hot and make the same kind of run. Who knows? I would just say, in the very first season of the new playoff structure, we got an example of how it has lowered the bar towards entry and maybe lightning striking. Hard for a team that hasn't won a playoff game since 2004 to be taken seriously. But if they do turn it around, the road is there for them.
Well, and the process of that begins now, if not sooner. And there was some news already this week with some options picked up, not picked up. Maybe we can start there. They pick up the option on Sonny Gray. They do the buyouts with Chris Archer, Dylan Bundy, and Miguel Sano. And I would characterize all four of those as the expected decisions. Sonny Gray, even though he had to go on the injured list a couple times this year, was a very effective pitcher for them, had a very low ERA, a guy you want back in your rotation, especially at a reasonable cost. And the other three guys just underperformed expectations, or there are cheaper options. But how do you, as you kind of think about those four moves, what were your takeaways from those?
Well, Sonny Gray had a sneaky good year. I don't think people realized how effective he was, because so much of the attention was paid to how he would get pulled in the fifth inning, sixth inning. It was frustrating him a little bit that the Twins didn't trust him a third time through most of the time. So, but when you step back, his ERA was the lowest by any regular starting pitcher who made 20 or more starts since Johan Santana was here, and that's a pretty good name to invoke. Yeah, Miguel Sano, the other two pitchers, were just 1 year tryouts. They trying to resurrect their careers, and neither really did. They did a good job of getting through the season, but it was clear that that their careers are mostly behind them. Miguel Sano is an interesting one, just because about 3 years ago, after Sano had agreed to his 3-year, $30 million contract, we were all thinking, wow, that's quite a commitment to a guy that's had some controversy and has trouble owning the strike zone. And I met a scout in, I think it was in a lunchroom in spring training, a scout I knew, who said he thought it was genius. He thought that we were coming off the 2019 season when home runs appeared to be exploding in baseball. The Twins set the record for the most by one team in 1 year. And he said that the chance is not zero, that in fact, he said it was about 50-50, that Miguel Sano would become kind of a player who would maybe almost by accident hit 1 or 2 home runs every week. That's the kind of contact he makes. And, he strikes out an awful lot of the time when he doesn't make that contact. But he said that this is a guy, if home runs keep going up and he can keep providing them, this is a guy that the Twins have locked in for an average of $10 million a year, and there would be teams out there that would pay him double and maybe even more than that. He thought it was a brilliant move, and 3 years later, it wasn't really so much a brilliant move, but it was a worthwhile gamble that lost in the 1,050 whatever strikeouts Miguel had. He was a exciting player, an interesting prospect, and a risk worth taking.
Well, and what was really interesting was by the end, because he struggled to a large degree last year, when he went out of the lineup this year, you almost forgot about him, even though, they really could have used a good, or at least a Miguel Sano average type of season where he did hit, 25 or 30 home runs and stayed healthy, even with all the strikeouts this year. And to not even be able to do that this year did make this a foregone conclusion. But this has to feel kind of like the end of an era, right? Because we talk about Sano and Buxton in tandem so much, especially, 2015 moving forward. Sano had such a good rookie year, helping them almost make the wild card in 2015, progressing up and down, but, still having a lot of that potential. And then that good season in 2019 to cut ties with him, to still have Buxton in the mix, but to have his, injury uncertainty kind of put anything about him a little bit into the question mark category. Just doesn't feel like that era ever materialized in a way that they could have wanted.
No, it and I think the strikeouts and the frustration about what could he play defense? Was he just going to be a designated hitter? That kind of overshadowed things. He hit 30 home runs last year.
Yes.
How much could the Twins have used 30 home runs this year?
Yeah.
It was a big loss, and you're right. It's the first time he's had a long-term injury where he was out. He missed all of May, June, and almost all of July before trying to come back. And it became clear that it became clear to him, I think, that this was his last season, that the Twins were never going to pony up $14 million next year. And that was difficult for him. I think the frustration about the strikeouts, plate discipline got to him quite a bit too. He talked about, it's my big project. I'm working on it. I'm working with the hitting coaches in spring training, and it just never happened for him. You're right. Now it's up to Buxton to, it was people forget it was Barrios, Buxton, and Sano in the space of about 100 games there that joined the team and looked like the next wave of Twins foundations. And you're right, they're left with Buxton, and he only played 80 games.
Yeah. Let's move on to one of the biggest, if not the biggest, offseason question, and one that they should have a answer to, I think, reasonably soon. You get Carlos Correa opts out of his deal. That was not unexpected, but he's a free agent now, and the Twins will be at least in the mix for him. They have a decision to make, I'd imagine, in terms of how far they want to go in that pursuit, and Correa has a decision to make in terms of, does he see this as a long-term fit? How as you think about the possibility of Correa signing a long, lucrative contract here versus somewhere else, where do you think we stand right now?
I think the notion of if Carlos Correa had spent the year in Cleveland or Detroit, anywhere, and was a free agent, we would think the notion that the Twins might have a shot at him pretty ludicrous. This is just not what they do, and so it's pretty funny. He was here because his agent called the Twins and said, "Would you take him for a year? We know you have an opening," and they did. And so they've never before had such an in with a prominent free agent. I don't think with Scott Boras that makes much difference. I think Carlos and Boras are going to take the highest offer, and but it does give the Twins some insight into what it's like having a player like that, having entry like that on your payroll. They were able to field a team. They won the challenge for the division title. They were able to work their payroll around having a $35 million player on the roster. One of the top 10 highest paid players in the league. I wonder what if they learned from that they do have room for a player like that. And to be honest, Carlos Correa was the ideal player for that, playing a position that they needed. That's one lesson that they could take. I think that they honestly will make a run at keeping him, but I think it will still come down to the bottom line, and the Twins have always been outbid for players like that.
Well, it is a crowded shortstop market too. It's a strangely a lot of pretty good shortstops hitting the market at the same time. They should all command pretty big numbers, but I guess two questions there is where does Correa fit into that pecking order, do you think? And if the Twins don't sign him, then what do they go and spend money on? Because if they've got now the $35 million coming off the books, if they don't sign him, they've definitely got. If they're thinking about signing him now, they've definitely got money to spend on something else. At least I would think
they do, and that might be the thing that. Financial flexibility is always so important to the Twins, and that might be something that they value too much. I don't know how recent the memory is of Josh Donaldson. They laid out what could have been $100 million for Josh Donaldson, and almost immediately regretted it. The pandemic year messed everything up, but the fact that they were so quick to cut ties with Josh Donaldson after 2 years shows me that that's another lesson that they may have learned, that they don't like being locked in to having that much devoted to one player. They do have other needs, and you mentioned that there are 4 or 5 good shortstops on the market, but that's also 4 or 5 teams, and in this case, it's the Dodgers, the Red Sox, the Braves, teams with money that need shortstops. So I think the market is going to be pretty strong for them. I'm sure Carlos Correa will receive some pretty representative offers. The Twins have other needs. Starting pitching, they like their young starters, but as this year showed, you can never have enough depth, and I don't think they have nearly enough top of the rotation depth. They've got Sonny Gray and Joe Ryan, and after that, some question marks. And you never know what you're going to get outing to outing. They need to shore that up. Another thing that the World Series showed is the value of a strong bullpen. I mean, the Astros won that World Series on the basis of their bullpen, largely, almost completely shut out through the World Series. The Twins, need to shore that up. They have one, maybe 1.5 really strong relievers that they can count on, and Duran, and we'll see about Lopez, maybe Griffin Jacks. But they don't have sort of depth that especially a team that uses its bullpen the way they do needs. So they do have other projects to get. They can free up some more money, maybe to afford Correa by letting Gio Urshela go, by maybe trading Max Kepler, which would also kind of clear some of the logjam that they anticipate having in the outfield. There is a need for some spending. They do have the money to spend. Now it's a matter of pulling off a trade or a free agent signing that has a little more productivity than some of the ones they've made lately. More of the Sonny Gray type of trade, and less of the Chris Archer, Dylan Bundy signings.
Well, you bring up a couple of good points. I want to get to a few more things here before we're done. I mean, one, the first big move they made this offseason was a change with their head athletic trainer. They didn't do much else on their field staff that I could really notice. But how much do you buy into the idea that just by better health, reasonable health, where does that position them? If you didn't change the roster hardly at all, where do you think they'd be positioned if they just had reasonable health next year?
They were in first place until September. Now it's probably the weakest division in baseball. But they're when Carlos Correa and Byron Buxton were healthy, when Sonny Gray and Joe Ryan were at their best, they went on pretty good run and looked like they were positioned for the postseason. I'll tell you, when it sure struck me how that changed, they went to Cleveland down 4 games with 5 to play in Cleveland. 3 weeks left in the season, the biggest series of the year. This is when they have to turn it on. I went in the clubhouse before the first game and looked at the lineup, and I thought, what are we even doing here? You know, They had Celestino and Contreras and Jake Cave in the outfield. They had Nick Gordon batting cleanup, Urshela batting third. You know, all things necessary by injury. They had, they used 2 rookie pitchers that weekend. It was a team. Team in September was not the team that played the whole year. It's frustrating. I sure understand the frustration of Twins fans at how completely they collapsed down the stretch, but it's also true that wasn't really their team. They changed trainers, which is an interesting move. I guess that's holding him responsible for some of, I think probably more the speed with which players came back. I think there were example after example after example of guys that were day to day and were gone for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. It sounds terrible, but they just need better luck with injuries. I don't know how you can lock that in. Obviously you can't. It was a team with young players on the rise. I think Twins fans were pretty happy with it about mid-season, about the All-Star break. The core of that team is still here, except for the shortstop.
Yeah, and that's a big one. I mean, if they don't re-sign him, that leaves a pretty big hole. He was number 1 on the team in WAR, kind of depending on which site you go by. 4 wins, 5 wins. He was a very good player for him, defensively and offensively for sure. And it took over a certain amount of clubhouse leadership from what I could see too. So that's a pretty big hole if that does indeed become a hole. But like we said, also would be money to spend on something else, perhaps pitching. Final thought for you, Phil. Like I said, not spring training yet, with a free agency beginning now. What do you think their first? They do tend to linger back sometimes and let the market come to them. How do you think they play it this year? And if you were, Derek Falvey, Thad Levine, like who would your, not necessarily a player, but what kind of phone calls would you be making first? Where would you be looking first to try to get better with this team?
Carlos Rodon, someone that I know very well from the White Sox and the Giants. Perhaps the best and perhaps the most. I don't think he's going to be cost prohibitive and probably the best guy for your money. He knows the division. They know him very well. I think he would be comfortable here. I think he is someone that they should call on. To me, that's the pretty obvious standout on the list. They will probably have to move quickly on them. Their tendency to wait until January, even February, to sign free agents is intentional. They say there are bargains to be had if you wait. The question is, if the bargains are of the Chris Archer variety, is that worth waiting for? Anyway, I think some of the pitching will get snapped up pretty quick. But other than that, I think they're going to wait and see how the shortstop market comes together. And I suspect that they are going to try to find a way to get through 3 months, 4 months, and hope that Royce Lewis comes back healthy. Whether or not he's still a shortstop, I think, is an open question. But the Twins seem awfully confident that he can resume playing shortstop when he returns. So there are some second-tier Elvis Andrus types that they may wait on and wind up with.
Well, it'll be a new look team in a lot of ways. New jerseys, new uniforms coming out pretty soon.
That's right.
As well. So we'll look forward to that. Phil, always love catching up on the Twins. We'll do this again soon, I'm sure, when there is a significant move in one direction or another. Until then, enjoy the off season. Enjoy the basking in the glow of your 36th consecutive World Series. And we'll see if World Series 37 is one perhaps that you will be covering for the hometown team. I don't know about that, but we'll see.
Boy, it's been a long time, hasn't it? That is one thing about going to the World Series every year is and being around the Twins all the time. Boy, it's been a long time since they've been to the World Series.
Indeed, it has. Thanks, Phil.
Okay.
Postscript to that conversation with Phil Miller, I don't think the Twins are going to sign Carlos Correa either, and I don't even really think that they should. As good as he was for them last year, as much as he, like Phil said, is kind of the perfect player in some regards, that just doesn't seem like the kind of move that's going to help the Twins over the next 5 to 8 years. Just knowing what payrolls are, knowing what their restrictions are, I'd feel differently if I thought their pitching was arriving in a certain way where you could count on some lower-cost pitching. I just don't think Carlos Correa is a $35 million player over the long haul. I think he had a good year last year. I think he's had a lot of good years in the past. I just would not want to tie myself long-term to that sort of contract for someone who has been very good, but who I don't think is necessarily a difference maker as a alpha on a championship team. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just what I watched this year. I don't feel like that is worth it. I feel like I would much rather invest in pitching than Carlos Correa, but we'll see what ends up happening. Let's finish with the cooler. Like I said at the jump, the big difference between the Wild and the Timberwolves right now is that their star player, when they absolutely need it, is showing up and making sure a losing streak doesn't turn into something more than that, something, a mental drain. Wild have been shut out 2 games in a row. They were deep into the second period of Wednesday's game at Anaheim, still without a goal in that game, trailing 1-0. Kirill Kaprizov puts one in on the power play, ends that drought, gets another one in the third period. They beat Anaheim 4-1. That is the difference right now between the Wild and the Wolves. I don't think either one of those teams is playing great right now, but their superstar player, Kirill Kaprizov, has 10 goals now in 13 games and is absolutely making sure that a mediocre start isn't becoming a hot topic of conversation in this market. He's making sure they get wins where they need to get wins, and that is the difference right now. I don't feel like the Wolves are getting that at all from any of their best players, and certainly not Karl Anthony Towns. That will do it for today. Should be lots of Vikings talk on Friday's show. I want to pick Ben Gessling's brain on Kirk Cousins again, the chain-wearing 7-1 quarterback of the Vikings. It's been quite a ride this season, and I think it's an interesting development, to say the least, in this year. Hope you enjoy that conversation. Hope you have a great rest of your Thursday. Back at it again tomorrow.